Social Security benefits have long been a concern for millions of Americans who rely on these payments to cover their basic living expenses. The reality is that for many recipients, these benefits simply don't stretch far enough to meet their needs, especially as inflation continues to outpace the cost of living adjustments that are supposed to help beneficiaries keep up with rising prices. In 2025, recipients saw a 2.5% cost of living adjustment, which was certainly welcome news. However, this increase fell short of what was actually needed to maintain purchasing power in the face of rising costs. Looking ahead to 2026, another cost of living adjustment has already been announced at 2.8%. But once again, there are serious questions about whether this will be sufficient to help recipients maintain their standard of living. Against this backdrop, a significant new proposal has emerged that could provide substantial relief to millions of Americans. A group of Senate Democrats has introduced legislation that would increase both Social Security and Veterans Affairs benefits by $200 per month for a 6-month period. This proposal represents a meaningful attempt to address the financial struggles that so many beneficiaries are currently facing. The question naturally arises as to why this proposal is limited to just 6 months rather than a full year or longer. According to reports, the strategy behind this time frame is to demonstrate the positive impact that such an increase could have on recipients' lives. By implementing this as a 6-month pilot program, lawmakers hope to show the incoming administration how beneficial this additional support could be for millions of people who depend on these programs. Rather than committing to a long-term increase immediately, the idea is to prove the concept and build support for potentially extending or making permanent such increases in the future. The legislation, known as the Social Security Emergency Inflation Relief Act, has garnered support from a coalition of Democratic senators from states across the country. These lawmakers recognize the urgent need to provide additional support to beneficiaries who are struggling to cope with higher prices for essential goods and services. The bill was introduced with the intention of sparking serious discussion about how to better support these vulnerable populations. One important detail about the proposed increase is the timeline for implementation. The extra $200 per month would boost benefit payments through July 2026, but the increase wouldn't actually go into effect until January 2026. This means that lawmakers are not calling for immediate action, but rather are proposing that this policy be ready to implement at the start of the new year. This timeline allows for proper discussion, debate, and preparation for such a significant change to benefit payments. To put this proposal in context, it's important to understand what the standard cost of living adjustment means for beneficiaries. The announced 8% cost of living adjustment for 2026 will amount to approximately $56 per month for the average recipient. While any increase is helpful, this modest bump is unlikely to significantly improve the financial situation for most beneficiaries, especially when considering the current economic environment. The broader economic picture adds urgency to this discussion. Despite efforts to bring inflation under control, the current inflation rate stands at 3%, a full percentage point above the Federal Reserve's target of 2%. This gap is particularly problematic because the cost of living adjustment for Social Security has already been locked in at 2.8%. This means that if inflation remains elevated or increases further, beneficiaries will effectively see their purchasing power decline even after receiving their cost of living adjustment. There are additional economic pressures on the horizon that could make this situation even more challenging. Various policy decisions and economic factors are expected to create additional inflationary pressures as 2025 comes to a close. These are realities that Americans will need to contend with, and they will particularly impact those on fixed incomes who have limited ability to increase their earnings. Adding to these challenges are disruptions in government services that are affecting millions of households. Recent government shutdowns have raised concerns about delays in critical benefit programs. SNAP benefits, which help millions of families afford food, face potential delays, and even the possibility of only partial payments being distributed. This could force households to make difficult choices about how to afford groceries and other necessities. Experts have warned that disruptions to SNAP could even contribute to higher food prices, as the reduced purchasing power affects demand patterns across the food system. The sponsors of this legislation have been clear about their reasoning for proposing such a significant increase. They argue that the standard cost of living adjustment for 2026 simply isn't enough for seniors and other beneficiaries who are facing skyrocketing costs for essentials like groceries, healthcare, and utilities. The proposed $200 per month increase is being framed as an emergency lifeline for those struggling to afford basic necessities in an environment of rising costs and economic uncertainty. It's worth noting that there is precedent for discussions about providing additional support to seniors and those on fixed incomes. Previous administrations have explored various approaches to helping these populations, though such proposals have often faced political challenges and questions about timing and implementation. The current proposal represents a bipartisan opportunity to address a widely recognized need, though its success will depend on building sufficient support across the political spectrum. The practical impact of a $200 per month increase cannot be overstated. For someone receiving Social Security benefits, an additional $200 over 6 months could make the difference between being able to afford necessary medications, keeping up with utility bills, or having enough food on the table. This isn't just about providing extra spending money, it's about helping people meet their basic needs and maintain their dignity and independence. There are questions about how such a program might be implemented in practice. Some discussions have raised the possibility of means testing, where the additional benefits would only go to recipients below certain income thresholds. For example, the increase might be limited to those with total annual incomes below $30,000. While this would reduce the overall cost of the program, it could also ensure that the resources go to those who need them most urgently. Beyond the direct impact on individual recipients, an increase like this would have broader economic effects. When millions of people have more money to spend on necessities, that spending supports local businesses, helps landlords receive rent payments on time, strengthens communities, and even benefits state economies through increased economic activity. There's a multiplier effect when money flows to those who will immediately spend it on essential goods and services. The timing and prospects for this legislation remain uncertain. With ongoing debates about government funding and operations, major policy initiatives like this may need to wait until other pressing issues are resolved. However, once normal legislative business resumes, proposals like this could quickly move to the forefront of policy discussions. What makes this proposal particularly noteworthy is its approach of combining Social Security and Veterans Affairs benefits in a single piece of legislation. This represents a somewhat novel approach that recognizes the similar challenges faced by both groups of beneficiaries. By addressing both programs together, the legislation could build broader support and create momentum for helping both populations simultaneously. The ultimate success of this proposal will depend on many factors, including the political climate, budget considerations, and the ability of advocates to demonstrate the real need for such assistance.